Good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Monday morning to you. Another morning with another nasty East Coast storm to talk about here. And I'm going to talk somewhat about the risk for flooding and severe weather, but we're also going to talk about some wintry weather to follow it that could produce some dangerous travel. Take a look at this here. This is the area that I'm most concerned with here today into tonight, where we could have snow squalls, which can cause some blinding visibility, a heavy, brief bursts of snowfall, colder temperatures, all that coming on the backside of our nasty storm that's caused some damage over the weekend, starting off in Florida Saturday night with dangerous amounts of coastal flooding in the Tampa Bay area, for example, to tremendous rainfall yesterday. We had a foot of rainfall in less than a day in places like Georgetown, South Carolina, tornadoes in the Myrtle Beach area, tornado warnings in eastern North Carolina, just a ton of rain, a very quickly deepening storm that has now got its eyes on the Northeast, where you're already dealing with some heavy rain this morning, but conditions could still get a little bit worse as this storm travels northward up into New York State and New England. Here's a look at the upper level pattern. This is called the water vapor imagery. It indicates where our storm systems are in the mid and upper levels, and I'm going to annotate for you guys here. Give me just a second. But what we can see is a big trough carved across the Great Lakes region, diving south and east. This is providing cold air and also intensifying our storm, which is racing up the East Coast right now. We've got a pretty good upper level circulation here. The orientation of the trough is from south southeast to north northwest, making it negatively tilted. Negative tilt in the trough allows our storm system to deepen. The pressure drops. That's causing your aches and pains today. Also causing the wind to crank up here in the warm sector where we have a south southeasterly jet stinging portions of the Northeast, especially southern New England. Behind it, we've got colder, drier air making its way down from the plains into the southeast. So a quieter day in the southeast. And then we're going to keep an eye on a storm circulating off the west coast of California, producing heavy snow in the mountains here, and probably some gustier showers across portions of central and southern Cal, as well as moisture across the Pacific Northwest. That storm not going to be as significant as the East Coast storm, but certainly something to watch here in the next couple of days. Here's a look at our upper level pattern. This is the European from weatherbell.com. This is the upper level track. Two distinct systems here this morning. One over the Carolina coastline racing up the East Coast. The second one is going to kind of absorb it as it drops quickly down through the Great Lakes region into the central Appalachians here. This is tonight. And then that will eventually move off the East Coast here tomorrow into tomorrow night. Behind it, a ridge of high pressure builds in. And if you want to see cold before Christmas like we did last year, this is a complete flip from what we saw this time last year. Rather than there being extreme cold, we're going to see above average mild temperatures for this time of the year, which is not going to put us in the seasonal in the feeling of Christmas. I don't know what the term I'm trying to find, but in the mood for winter weather. Let's just put it that way. We're getting our season's beatings today, but then we're getting mild weather after that. And all the storminess as we get towards the weekend here leading up to Christmas will be in the west. Eventually, we will see that moisture moving out of the Rockies, producing some wet weather for Christmas Day, somewhere here in the south central states, maybe some snow across the Rockies and northern plains. But take a look at the east. We've got a Merry Torchmas, if you want to call it that, where temperatures will be on the mild side for Christmas. Me personally, I don't mind that at all because I usually travel Christmas morning. And the last thing I want to deal with is squally, wintry weather. Those of you guys that do the last minute shopping online, say through Amazon or whatever you choose, delivery drivers are certainly going to have better conditions facing them this year than last. So count that as a blessing. I certainly do. And I want to express my appreciation for those of you in that service industry. I know you guys work your butts off this time of the year, and I'm glad you're going to be dealing with quieter weather than what we did this time last year when a lot of folks lost power. We had snow and Buffalo just got creamed. Fortunately, this Christmas does not look like that, but we are going to have another significant storm to keep an eye on over the south central US. I don't think it's all going to be rain either. We will have some snow, but probably not in the places that really want to see snow. So anyway, moving on from that, looks like a Christmas tree in the Northeast. Let me break this down for you guys. The darker greens here are flash flood watches. We see that from the mouth of the Chesapeake right on up through New England, the eastern half of Pennsylvania and New York, all of New England under a flash flood watch. We see the reds, those are flash flood warnings. Definitely a concern for flooding across the interior portions of the Northeast today, as well as the eastern shore of Virginia. The brighter greens are flood warnings as well. We see that over the Susquehanna Valley, parts of the Hudson Valley, Catskills into Connecticut, New Jersey, and Delaware. The pinks are winter storm warnings. This is going to be the cold part of this storm, actually the second piece that follows it. Downwind of Lake Erie and across southwestern PA, western Maryland, and the West Virginia mountains. We are going to see some significant elevational snow here today, especially tonight, first thing tomorrow. The purple colors are a lesser extreme winter weather advisory, but certainly could see dangerous travel across the rest of western New York, western PA, southern West Virginia, also southern Ohio, eastern Kentucky, and the thumb of Michigan over here north of Flint. Here is a look at a couple of models I'm going to show you guys. Here's the European starting off this morning. Low pressure slingshotting up into eastern Canada here by tonight. Backside snows, very cold air and gusty winds following. So a nasty feel tonight over portions of the eastern Great Lakes and the Appalachians. But we are going to dry out after this afternoon over New England as winds switch around from southerly moist wind to dry westerly and northwesterly wind. It's ripping on Mount Washington. We're going to see quieter weather here the next couple of days for much of the country. Pretty good travel this week after the storm leaves. And then our storm over California does start to move inland here later in the week. Really, Wednesday into Thursday, it just kind of drops down the coast of California, taking its nice sweet time here on the PCH. By the time we get to the weekend, it will start to make some inroads into the southwest. So some rain coming for Phoenix and Vegas here by Friday. We'll also see moisture building up probably off the Gulf Coast. Timing on this is uncertain. I'll show you the GFS in a minute. This is the Euro. There's about a day of difference between the two, but it is coming. And unfortunately for us wanting to see winter weather, we just don't really see that here in the next few days. We'll eventually get it towards Christmas Day, probably in the Rockies into the high plains, but primarily looks like rain here Christmas Day, somewhere for the southeast up into even Minneapolis. Tough to believe we're talking about rain in Minneapolis on Christmas versus last year when we were well below the 0-degree mark. And then things should be a little quieter, but we should see more storms getting ready to move in behind this system here late in the month. And I think we are going to eventually see some colder air returning. It's just going to be delayed here, holding on until probably early January. And the magnitude of that cold and where the winter storm set up is still highly uncertain. I'm not going to get into that in today's video, but I will tell you, you'll probably see on social media people talking about it. What I'm going to say right now is that I just don't think there's enough skill in trying to figure out who and what and where that's going to look like just yet. We have to get a little bit closer to that time frame after Christmas to start really taking a good educated guess on what things are going to look like. GFS model here is going to agree with the European, as you would imagine, in the short range. We do see some timing changes with our California storm. In this example, we see the GFS being more progressive. This is this Friday. We already see rain breaking out over the south central U.S. and snow across the interior of the western U.S. on Saturday. And this is a faster solution than the GFS. It's got rain already moving into Florida here on Christmas Day, then the second batch coming up through Texas. It's not out of the question. We could see a little severe weather from this. I don't think we're talking a tornado outbreak, anything of that nature. But the GFS moves things along quicker than the European. It's already got another storm moving into the Northwest here on Christmas Day. But one thing is for certain, it's going to have energy moving eastward here in pieces, and then maybe some leftover cold, allowing for some snow somewhere here. In this particular model run of the GFS, it brings that cold air all the way down into the southeast in time for the 29th and 30th and starts to bring it in on the backside of our storm, producing maybe some wintry weather. But that is so far uncertain at this point because not every run has been showing that. It's just kind of back and forth on this. So it'll get colder here, I think, by New Year's Eve, but I don't know if it's going to be a winter storm scenario or just kind of some dry cold. So keep an eye on that in the future. I neglected to show the rest of this area that's getting some strong winds. The Appalachians, especially the foothills, will have high winds today into tonight. Winter weather will impact downwind areas of Lake Michigan, western Michigan under a winter storm warning. That's the pink that extends into north central Indiana. We have advisories all the way down here into the Smokies, over the Louisville and Lexington areas, Cincinnati under a winter weather advisory. And that's for the snow squalls we're going to be taking a look at. Here's where our low pressure is right now. It is moving through the Poconos into the Catskills and should continue to drift northward and drop into the 970s, which is a very deep low pressure system here. It'll probably peak here this evening over Quebec and then pressure should start coming up as this system does what we call occludes. And then we're going to see strong winds on the backside. There is a threat for some severe weather. I don't think this is a repeat of yesterday in the Carolinas for those of you here in the Northeast, but a marginal risk at this point, including eastern New Jersey, New York City, tri-state area. If you want to call it upstate, I call it downstate New York, much of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and southern Mass does have a marginal risk of severe weather. Not tornadoes, though. Instead, we're talking severe wind where gusts could get over 60 miles per hour. Here's a look at the helicity. This is the amount of rotation you see from the ground up to about a kilometer, and it's very high here. So we have a lot of wind energy and some turning with the wind. And you'll see that it continues through about lunchtime here and then clears off the coast here, gets some felicity in Maine, but more stable air in place. But here's the ingredient that really does make this conditional. That is the amount of CAPE, convective available potential energy, that's storm fuel. And you can see on the map here, it is not high at all, very meager this morning. So we really need to see a lot of CAPE mixed in with a lot of helicity to see tornadoes. Could we have some stronger winds, some stronger thunderstorms? Certainly, but I think it's going to be a brief scenario here where we get a very small window around lunchtime and early afternoon. Then things are going to quiet down. So I don't think severe weather is going to be a big deal today, but it's certainly something that's possible. The bigger deal, I think, for us here, especially on the coast, is going to be the wind. And take a look at these potential wind gusts here. 60 miles per hour over southern New England, Long Island, even coastal New Jersey. High winds as well in the mountains. I'll show you that in just a little bit. As the morning wears on, we could see wind gusts over 70 miles per hour in southeastern New England, 60 plus in Maine. And then as the afternoon wears on, 70 to 75 mile per hour wind possibilities here over down east Maine. I think this is the very high ceiling for what we're going to get. I would not be shocked if these numbers ended up being a little bit too high, but still high enough where we have to have folks that are going to be dealing with power outages and potential for coastal flooding and just dangerous conditions here over the Maine seacoast down through southeast New England and across Long Island. So the strongest winds will be this morning. And then this is 11 a.m. You could see they start moving into Massachusetts. And then after 11 a.m., probably around 1 or 2 across down east Maine. It'll be windy as well across the Maritimes of Canada, not so much as you will see in your American neighbors to the west here. Taking a look at the Great Lakes, we have some pretty gusty winds on the backside here. You see this advancement here, stronger wind gusts up to 50 miles per hour on Lake Michigan, 40 miles per hour over parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, eastern Missouri, Indiana, into western Ohio. You can kind of see how things advance here. This is kind of a secondary Arctic boundary that's going to shift south and east and bring that colder air down in the wake of our storm system. And here it comes into western PA after about 7 o'clock tonight. Looking at kilometers per hour across Atlantic Canada, we'll see winds ramping up here this morning over Nova Scotia, southern New Brunswick. The strongest winds will be this afternoon into the early evening hours, right around sunset and beyond. We'll have the potential for wind gusts of 100 kilometers per hour on PEI, southern New Brunswick, western and central parts of Nova Scotia in the typically windier areas, and perhaps a peak of 120 kilometers per hour. Most of that wind will be this afternoon into the first half of tonight. Also on the backside of our storm, gusty winds across the mountains. On the higher ridge tops, likely to see wind gusts over 50, maybe as high as 70 miles per hour. And you'll see around the Boone area, Watauga County, Avery County, wind gusts may get over 60 to 70. I'm sure Grandfather Mountain, Mount Mitchell will probably have wind gusts over 80 miles per hour this morning. And here comes the second push coming in here this evening. Let's take a look at our storm timing here. I didn't get to that and I apologize, but here's the rain this morning. This is 7 a.m. You'll see it's very quickly going to be wrapping up across the mid-Atlantic region, followed by colder air pushing in around lunchtime or so here across the eastern lakes into the mountains. The heaviest of the rain is going to move up quickly through Maine into Quebec here by lunchtime. But we do have this area of squally weather to keep an eye on where we could have briefly strong wind, maybe some rumbles of thunder, although that's kind of uncertain. Certainly some heavy rainfall that could lead to some ponding on roadways and some river flooding as well. And then we'll see the dry air quickly races in and we're quiet by the evening rush here in New York City and Philadelphia. Getting there in Boston probably will take till about 6 o'clock. And then Maine dries out this evening. And then here comes the next piece of energy bringing the heavy snow, which I'll show you guys here in just a little bit. Right now, just a slight risk for excessive rainfall. I do think we'll see continued flooding in some areas. We just had so much rain over the last 4 to 5 months. I find it hard to believe we're just not going to have some flooding. But this is a quickly moving storm. If it were slower, I think we'd have a bigger problem. Fortunately, we don't. Here's a look at our total rainfall from the HRRR model here. Leading up to tonight, most places are going to see 1 to 2 inches of rain with the potential for over 3. and maybe some higher amounts across the mountains of New England over here into the higher elevations of Quebec north of the St. Lawrence. Also see potentially a couple inches here in the Maritimes, lesser amounts on Long Island, and drying out, fortunately, here downwind of the Appalachians. A closer look at New England shows us the heavy rain, and a lot of it's happening right now as you're watching this morning, but still continuing into the afternoon. We do have the potential to see up to 6 inches in the higher elevations, but most folks will see 2 to 4 inches falling. Lesser amounts near the coastline where the wind is the bigger deal. Here's a look at northern New England. We see the totals very quickly climbing this morning into the early afternoon hours. And across Atlantic Canada, we are going to see rainfall totals, generally speaking, between 30 and 60 millimeters, but some potential to see over 100 millimeters in the higher elevations. Local areas have to watch out for that. And then we look at the snow on the backside, and this is the snow squall parameter. These numbers are formulated to help forecasters determine when and if we're going to have to deal with snow squalls. When you see amounts around 4, then we definitely see that potential. And I think the greatest threat is going to be downwind of Lake Michigan here later this morning. Here's the prediction, though. It shows those winds and those snow squalls over Lake Michigan advancing quickly southeast into the late afternoon and early evening hours into the Appalachians. So from the Alleghenies right on down through the West Virginia Blue Ridge down to the Smokies are going to see the risk for quickly changing weather here, and that could create dangerous travel. Not ignoring you guys in the West, but the Sierra Nevada will also have some snow squalls later on. But here's a look at our potential snow totals over the next 24 hours, up to as much as 15 inches. And that'll be in local spots. Most of us are probably only going to see a quick ½ inch to inch. Some of those snow belts, though, could concentrate higher amounts. It's going to be very local, something that'll quickly change, and something I just need you all to be mindful of if you are planning any travel today and tonight around the Great Lakes and all the way down into Kentucky, Tennessee, and Western North Carolina. I'm going to break things down for you guys here real quickly. This is Michigan this morning. We'll see totals climbing as the morning wears on, maybe up to as much as 2 inches around Traverse City and Cadillac, as well as around Grand Rapids, maybe close to 2 around Kalamazoo. And a lot of this is going to fall over a short amount of time, 1 to 2 inch per hour snow rates, causing very low visibility. I don't want to ignore you in Wisconsin and the UP. You guys are going to see some as well, but I think it'll be worse downwind of Lake Michigan here. Even downwind of Lake Huron and the Georgian Bay, we could see a couple of inches here. So local amounts west of Kalamazoo, as much as a foot possible here by lunchtime tomorrow. And downwind of northern Lake Michigan, as much as 9 to 11 inches. This is just a predicted amount of snowfall. The actual snow depth might be a little bit lower, but will still be significant for those of you here in Michigan. We haven't really seen much snow yet this winter, but how much actually sticks? We could still see 6, 8, maybe 9 inches locally, perhaps even 10 inches west of Kalamazoo, heading towards the lakeshore here, just inland. Looking downstate from Michigan into Indiana, Illinois, not a lot around Chicago. Really, north central Indiana has that risk right along, I think this is I-90. Potentially 6 inches of snow between South Bend and the Ohio border, especially east of South Bend, maybe 2 to 3 around Fort Wayne. When you get down to Indianapolis and Bloomington, right now not showing much snow, but it's very possible we could see a quick burst. So be prepared for that in Indianapolis. I think the time frame on that is going to be right around 10 to lunchtime here this morning, maybe a little bit more into the evening hours. Looks like Ohio is actually going to see more due to the fact that the trough is heading east. And the south suburbs of Cleveland are certainly going to get hit. Northeastern Ohio here are going to get hit. Potentially 13, 14 inches could fall downwind of Lake Erie, but the majority of Ohio is probably going to get away with less than 2 inches of snow here. But even down to Cincinnati, Portsmouth, Chillicothe, Parkersburg, Athens, Ohio, Peebles, Ohio, all could see close to 1 inch of snow here. And the majority of that is going to occur here around the lunchtime into the afternoon hours, creating slippery, hazardous travel here tonight for those of you that have travel plans in Ohio. Let's take a look farther south before we shift east, maybe a little bit around Louisville and Lexington. Again, this is one model. We could even see some down across the Cumberland Gap north of Knoxville, maybe near La Follette into southeastern Kentucky, but most of our amounts are going to be pivoting over into the mountains here. And we'll see that number pile up pretty quickly here this afternoon. A little bit of snow around Charleston, Huntington, down to Beckley, more snow. The mountains, though, we'll see very heavy snow here tonight with the possibility of seeing close to a foot across the ski areas. Generally speaking, in the Smokies, we're looking at 1 to 3 inches, locally higher amounts over parts of western North Carolina into far eastern Tennessee, but not expecting anything to really make it east of I-81 at this point. except maybe around Hillsville, Virginia, we could see a little bit of snow. We're also going to see it up in Pennsylvania here. This is late afternoon, start piling up around Erie, over to Grove City, Jamestown, New York, the ski country here. Going to see significant amounts of snow. And by tomorrow afternoon, locally, potentially up to a foot of snow if the HUR is right, but I'd say at least 6 inches you can count on. Western New York will also see significant snow. Altoona could see a little bit. I think the higher elevations, the Laurel Highlands to Somerset here, could be looking at 3 to 6, maybe locally higher amounts. Western Maryland as well, 6, 7 inches. Not a lot in Morgantown, but you could see a brief amount of heavy snow. Central PA on east, we're just going to see elevational snow at this point. I don't think we see much till you get up into New York State. And speaking of New York State, excuse me. Generally speaking, it's all going to be dependent on where you are with respect to the lakeshore. Higher elevations could pick up an inch or so of snow, but those bands coming in off the lake could enhance our totals, and we could be looking at as much as 6 to 8 inches somewhere north and east of Jamestown, maybe to east of Fredonia and Dunkirk. Keep an eye on things in Niagara Falls, New York. Could see locally 6 inches of snow as well. Thank you all so much for watching today. Apologize for getting us out a little late. My travel's been pretty extensive. Gonna have more of that next week, but we will have more videos this week. I'm gonna talk tomorrow about the upcoming storm moving into the west and how it's gonna maybe impact us here for Christmas into the early part of next week. But my end credits all go to God. I am a Christian and I give all the glory to God. I appreciate this opportunity and the blessings. Not every day is guaranteed, but God has given me another day to share with you all the weather and to help you all be prepared for the weather. But I couldn't do it without God and my belief in Jesus. And I just want to talk about joy real quick, because I think it's something we struggle with this time of the year. There is a difference between happiness and joy. We can all be happy, but to truly have joy, you understand that the tough times are going to be there, but you can count on all joy that those trials are going to come. James says, James 1 and 2, he says, "My brethren, count it all joy when ye fall into diverse temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience." And before I became a Christian, I did not have this joy. I had happy times, of course, we all do, but I did not see optimism in my future. I did not understand what heaven was and what was there and what the promises were of God. It really took, honestly, just God working through me, through people around me, that allowed me to see the joy that they have, to help me understand that my worth was actually in God and not in how much money I made, who my friends were, how successful I was, what I looked like, how much I weighed, any of that. My joy comes in the Lord, and joy comes in the morning no matter what happens. Luke 6:23, the writer tells us that rejoice ye in that day and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven, for in the like manner did their fathers unto the prophets. And I find joy in this time of the year, just knowing that we all get together with our families, and it can be difficult for those of us who have lost loved ones, lost our jobs, have health challenges, people that have family members, maybe we have fractured relationships with. But knowing that you do not have to have a fractured relationship with God to get to heaven. In fact, you can have a very loving relationship and maybe not even understand what God has in store for you. God, I believe, has great plans for you, like he did for me the year that I converted to a Christian in 2013. He took my job away from me and gave me the time to understand him more. And now much bigger things have happened since that move. I could have been heading into a downward spiral, but instead I trusted God and I went through a lot of trials, and we still do go through trials. So all I wanted to say is that, this time of year, we can argue all we want about what the holidays are, what Christmas is, what everybody believes. But just understand that God wants us to have joy in our lives, no matter what we're going to deal with, because we're all going to deal with stuff, right? So I just want to let you all know that you have my support and my love. I really appreciate you. I will be happy to pray for you. If you're not a Christian, that's okay as well. I'm not judging you. In fact, I'm not somebody who's intolerant of other people. It's just what I've chosen to believe, what I feel is important, and what I believe God has led me to share with you all today. So I hope you all have a blessed day, and I will catch up with you again tomorrow morning. God bless you. See you then.